Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, I'm going to be showing you how to 3D print, set up and maintain this. This is a hybrid DIY 3D printable vertical 100mm round pipe hydroponic system. There's a mouthful for you. Let me show you what you need to build it. We'll need some 3D printers. One will do, and that will just allow you to print all of the 3D printable parts. Let's run through them with you now. Here I have the selection of parts that's available in the latest files folder on my Patreon. This is running from top to bottom, and we'll start at the bottom. This is not exhaustive. I have included multiple versions of the same thing, just like this is two separate tops, depending on how you want to hang the system. At the bottom, we have the collector. This collects the water from the bottom of the 100mm pipe, directs it into a smaller diameter pipe so that you're not wasting excess money on buying extra 100mm pipe. The next piece I've designed is the disperser. The disperser is a design that's heavily based on the modular hydroponic system that was the first 3D printable hydroponic system that we covered on this channel. And as you can see, a 13mm piece of pipe plugs into the bottom of the disperser and a 13mm pipe plugs over the top of the disperser. And this allows the 13mm tube to continue up through the disperser and to the top where it will be evenly distributed and fall, but not fall the entire length of the channel, rather fall onto the dispersers distributed throughout the channel, and it will create droplets falling rather than a waterfall. The next piece will be familiar to you. This is just a round pipe version of our vertical hydroponic system plug. I have added in a top piece to stop the plants from falling forward if they're too heavy. The plug will just sort of jam against that and it will just give us some more stability throughout our system. Here we have the top disperser. Now it is threaded so that it will just screw into, and I apologize for the stringing, it will just screw into our top piece. Now our top piece can either be something like this. This is one I designed so that it will fit directly over a bar or any kind of hanging object that you want to suspend it from. And the disperser screws into the bottom of our print, just like so. And that just slides into the top of our 100mm tubing and plugs directly into our middle line, which is feeding the top and dispersing the nutrient down. Now, I wasn't particularly happy with this design because I don't trust the 3D print to hold the weight of a full tower with water and plants within the tower. So this is what I've been working on. It doesn't look like much, but there's a lot of thought gone into this. It's got a screw on the base, it's got a hole in the side, and it's got a semicircular protrusion cut out of the top. Now what you do with this is, if we insert a heavy duty metal hook into our top, we can then insert a bolt and do up the bolts so that we have a hanging point for our system, and this will allow us to support the 100mm pipe that we slip over the top of this when the pipe has holes drilled out matching the diameter of your bolt. So about 12mm holes. This will allow us to hold the system up by not only the 3D print, but the pipe as well. And it will give us that extra strength that I thought this print would not. So you would have to screw the pipe into the side of this print, whereas this one is held up entirely by the pipe, and the 3D print is really only there to hold up the internals of the system. And onto that, we can again just screw our disperser and plug it into the system. Okay, let's get onto the physical materials you'll need to get from the hardware store. Okay, a few of the things you'll need today. You'll need a drill with a drill bit and a Christmas tree bit. Now, you obviously don't need two drills. You'll need some hex head bolts. Now, these are M10 by 130mm galvanized hex head exterior quality bolts. The nuts are included, and I've gone 130 just so I have some wiggle room on the outside of the pipe. You'll need a pipe. You can see that this one already has holes cut out of it. This was the round pipe rain gutter grow system, and luckily the hole sizing is exactly the same as the sizing we'll be using for the plugs in this system, and that is 64 millimeters. So you'll need a 64 millimeter or a 63 millimeter, depending on what you can get your hands on, hole saw. And into... Rude. And we're also gonna need something to cut it. This is a cheap miter saw. It's gonna give me a nice straight cut, which I want for the ends of these systems. You're also going to want something, what's with all the noise? It's a bloody dead end. You're also going to want something to hang it from. Now, because I am using a greenhouse, obviously I have structure above which I can hang it from. However, if you do not have structure to hang it from, you can do the same thing as we did with our square pipe vertical hydroponic system, and at each end of our pipe, we can have a star picket where it is attached. So you can get the 2400 star pickets, drive it down 400, and have it 2 meters above the ground, hanging the pipes from that style of system. And there is absolutely no reason why you can't mount a pole to a wall with some brackets and hang this system on a wall as well. Now we're gonna have to figure out the length of pipe that we're going to cut and use within the area that we're using. But first I'll have to clear it out. As you can see, I've been quite lazy. Okay, so for the reservoir, I'm going to be using this 100-litre plastic storage container. And I'm just going to dig it down as far as I can, and then we're going to get a height. Now, the height is going to be based on the distance from where you're hanging it down to top of the storage container, minus whatever size pipe you're using. I'll be using 90 millimeter pipe. And the reason I'm using 90 millimeter pipe is because I've got it left over from my old NFT system and the holes are already drilled. So the spacing should be fine for our system we're building today. And I'm just trying to recycle as much of the systems that I've tested, found out that they worked or didn't, and then moved on. So I'm gonna dig this down as much as possible to get as much height for these systems as possible. And then we can measure it and cut our 100 millimeter pipe. So rather than guessing all of the lengths that I need to cut, I'm actually going to set the bottom half of the system up first. So I'm going to run 90 millimeter piping from the pole on the other side to the top of our system here. I'm also going to cut the front half of the lid so that we have a piece that we can remove. And directly where the center used to be, I'm going to drill in a hole, just enough for the 90 millimeter pipe to drop through. And as you can see, this allows us to have a access flap, so you can attach hinges if you like, or just remove it, which is absolutely fine as well. And you can access the res for the nutrient without disturbing the pipe at the base of the hanging systems. So now we're going to cut to size the collection pipe for the base of our vertical systems. Okay, so I've now realized an error of my ways. I really should have had this pipe all the way over here so that I could have an extra vertical system, but that's okay. You can learn from my mistakes, I guess. So this is what it's going to look like, and yeah, so what I'm going to do is screw an end cap to that post so I can just slot it in and it will hold itself up, and then slide it into this section here. This is just a 90-degree bend with a little bit of pipe so it slips in nicely like so. Now the way that you support this system is definitely going to depend on what infrastructure you have around you. Just use your logic, find the simplest way to do it. I have a pole there, so I'm drilling straight into the pole through an end cap, and I'm going to use that end cap to hold the pipe above the ground. So we just want to make sure that it has a slight drop on the pipe, like that. I'm going to screw it at the top, then we won't have any leaks. Just enough to hold the pipe off the ground. You can just insert the pipe at both ends, and then slide that one in like that. How good. Now I'm just going to throw some screws into the top of this res, and that should hold that pipe in place. And just while you're here, I want you to have a look at the shade that's being cast onto this system. I didn't want to build any lower than this because there is actually not much light that penetrates down here except through the middle of the day. So you can see that the sun actually starts here. It ends right where the system ends. I did think about this. I wanted to get it as low as possible, but there's not much reason to. It's just a whole lot of digging, especially when the bottom plants are going to be somewhere around here, and I don't want them to be lacking any sun. For the support, we're going to be connecting this pipe with conduit saddles to the roof of the greenhouse. Just going to, I've got long screws so we can have it come slightly off the top. Theoretically, our system should just be able to be raised and hung like that. That's pretty cool. The length of the pipe that we need to cut, 1940. Now we're just going to drill out the holes for the bolts. You really want to get this edge perfectly straight. Like that. We're going to need to put the hook in first. So, like that. There's the top of our system. Ready to go. This is the bottom of our system. So we'll just slide that on like so. We'll glue that in later. So now we just hook it on. Put the bottom. Worried that that wasn't going to work for a second there, but look at that. That is slightly too high, but that is perfect. Look at that. I'm going to need to make them shorter, but that's actually good. I'm happy with that. It worked. And then once we've got them all cut to the size that we need, we can put in our holes, plumb up the system, and then attach our plant holders. So I've now got my 6 pipes cut to size, and I've also got all of the bolt holes put in the top and made sure that the tops fit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue cutting these holes, and we're going to space them around the system. So I'm going to have 3 rows, 1 on each third of the cylinder, and they're going to be spaced. 1 will be here, 1 will be here, and then it will continue around like so. It's now time to plumb up our system. So to do this, we're playing with the design of the 3D print. I've actually introduced this disperser, which is going to sit almost in the middle of the system. And the reason I've done this is to slow the water down as it moves through the system and spread it back out when it gets about halfway. So what we want to do is we want to lay out our components, just pushing both ends onto the disperser from the center. Put our hook in and our bolt through and do up our bolt. At which point we can silicone in our end piece. And then to our holes, we're going to add in our round pipe Jiffy peat pellet acceptors. These are going to hold the plants in the system. So to do that, I've got just some black button head screws just to keep the whole system nice and neat. Make sure that they're upright, make sure that they're nice and straight, and we're also going to silicone around the hole before we put them on. And once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. Now that looks pretty cool. And that should just hook over the top of your pipe, and you can then feed in the pipe and slide it into place. Oh, that's pretty cool. And now I'm going to place the rest of the holders onto the rest of the pipes. So to begin with, I'm just going to run 3 towers. I just want to test the system to start with to make sure we're going down the right track with this system. So now I'm going to run the pump. We're going to run it from the res down the bottom and up through the pipe, and we're going to connect it to these pieces running down here. So we're going to cut these pieces off to the right length, put an elbow in here, some T-pieces in there, and we can connect up the pump and see how the system works. And for the pump today, we're using the AP3000 water feature pump. From this pump, I'm going to come directly up and into this pipe here. Put it down into the res. We're going to come up off the top of this with some hose. We're going to connect up the hose like this. I'm just going to give myself extra. We can pop this back into place. And our pump is now connected to the hose within the channel. And I've just realized this would probably have been easier if I did this before I just connected that up. But here we are. So I'm going to cut this hose here where it's going to meet the hose in the channel. Connect on a T-piece to the bottom. Connect the T-piece into this part of our hose. Oh, okay. Okay, well, we are almost done. It's now time to check if the system runs. So, we'll plug it in. Yep. And as you can see, we've got the water returning down to the reservoir, which is fantastic. That's aerating the reservoir nicely. I'm actually so stoked with how this has turned out. You can see the water coming, dripping down, and actually splashing on those bottom pieces. The splashing will be stopped by the peat pellets that I put in there. This is really good though. This means that it's working. So as you can see, while I get wet, just before we put the pellets in, the back of the holders are actually holding the hose in place down the middle, and it's going to be a highway for the nutrient. That was unintentional, but just because of the way that they're all positioned, they push the hose into the center, and that's a good thing. So let me just get these peat pellets and we'll fill up the system. So you can see that these pellets have only just germinated. They're a little bit smaller than I'd usually put out, but I really want to get some plants into this system just to get rid of the splashing. And I would recommend when having plants in this system and taking them out, you replace them immediately with pre-planned and pre-germinated pellets. So I'm just going to pop them in the holes, and I can already see that it's working because that one stopped splashing, and pop it in that one. In that one, we'll just plant it out like a vertical garden, which it is. This is really satisfying actually. So just as a test, because I don't really want it on all the time, because the little spillages it does have, I don't want them to be perpetual. So I'll only have them on maybe like a quarter of the time in the day, and then like 1/8 to 1/16 the time during the night. So with a 24-hour timer, you can see here how my daytime is really frequent and my nighttime is really infrequent. So that's just to adapt to the time of the day, because there is no media in this system and we have to account for that, and there will be no redundancy if it gets too hot and the roots dry out. I'm now going to add in the nutrient. We'll go calcium first, and now we'll do our other elements. Mix those in. I should have just under 100 liters of nutrient, and I've put in 60 grams of both the NitroCal and the Spec T, and it should be about 1.6. So let's have a test. We've got a pH of 5.3. I might have to take that up a tiny notch, and we have 1.65. So that is perfect. It is winter, so the plants aren't doing much at all, but 1.5 to 1.6 is perfect for the greens that I'm doing. You could have it even a bit lower if you like. This is absolutely fine, okay? So we'll chuck the lid on, and there it is, a round pipe vertical hydroponic system. It's actually got no leaks. I'm pretty impressed. I'm gonna add in a float valve so we can top it up. And I've got plenty of updates coming for you guys on this and all of the other systems that I've been building recently. If you want access to the files to 3D print this and everything else you've seen on the channel, head over to my Patreon, and the files are available in the latest files folder once you become a Patreon of the channel. Thanks for watching this episode of Hoochos. Happy hydroponicking, and I'll see you next time on Hoochos. Ah, I nearly fell through the camera again.